everyone, and welcome to another News Coolum video. Good morning from San Diego. I'm about to head over to the Fully Charged live show. I really don't know what to expect, right? I was going to go to the one that they did in Austin, but the tickets sold out, and I wasn't able to go, so I was going to make that a nice, fun little drive in the Chevrolet Bolt EV. And head out there last year, or 2 years ago, I guess. Anyway, so I haven't had a chance to go to the Fully Charged live show yet, but now they're doing it here in San Diego, just a short 600-mile drive. I posted that road trip up in a different video, mostly uneventful, but some important takeaways, especially for the Chevrolet Bolt EV and what it's like to travel right now with the current charging infrastructure in California in a 6-year-old EV with a 10% battery degradation. So anyway, but yeah, I'm gonna stop by the bank maybe. I'm a little over 25% battery right now. I'll probably try to find some time to charge later on today, maybe after the show. But for right now, I think I'm just gonna, stick with what I have. I don't know what to expect, so we're gonna head over and just see. I know there's gonna be a lot of people there, and I think even my local electric vehicle advocacy group from Ventura County might have a booth there. So we'll just go and check it out and see what there is to see.
I kept meeting these people who were working on things like battery packaging, which I can't tell you how obscure that sounded then, and battery management software. What's that? But if you just look at the Actera, that is incredible bit of innovation built in this country. We should be so proud that that's happening here. It is fantastic that there's manufacturing starting again in America. I hope this is a very inspiring event for you to attend.
Okay, well, that was interesting. Day one in the books. I didn't do maybe as much as I could have done. Fully Charged Live was kind of, it's a little bit different than what I expected in terms of, it is sort of vendors, but not really selling products, right? Not in the same way as you would go to other types of vendor stores, but it's more selling in the bigger picture, right, of services or upcoming technologies, that sort of thing. So it's kind of interesting. EVgo had a display there, and I talked to some of the people from EVgo, kind of shared my thoughts, had some pretty lengthy, in-depth discussions, and maybe that's the big benefit here of Fully Charged Live is sort of those in-depth discussions. I attended a few different panels. I think Robert Llewellyn led one, sort of on the California energy and what they're doing to transition to electric vehicles. And it was an interesting panel. I'm not sure I agree with everybody that was there. And as a Californian, I think there are some definite chinks in the armor of California's mystique as leading the world in EVs. I think they said it was California, Norway, and I forget who else. But I mean, California, we got some problems, right? They had Hannon, who was the representative for the California Energy Commission, and he did mention that they were looking at funding grants and things like that, emphasizing communities, and he brought up a key point that a lot of the California Energy Commission funding at this point should be going probably to programs that wouldn't get funded on their own.
The California budget from last year and this year is a combined $10 billion. $10 $10 billion in zero-emission vehicles and zero-emission vehicle infrastructure. The federal funding was $7.5 billion. It's not quite apples to apples because $7.5 billion was infrastructure. Our $10 billion is infrastructure and vehicles. But clearly, we are making massive investments, and we're actually really committed to getting to those areas that might not adopt it as soon on their own. So we have a commitment of at least 50% of our investments are to benefit low-income and disadvantaged communities, portfolio-wide. And we do a lot of the grant funding for infrastructure, and we've had solicitations dedicated just to rural communities, just to multi-unit dwellings like apartments and condos.
It really gets me thinking with their California Energy Commission grant funds that they did that built out an electric charging corridor right along I-5 throughout the state. You know, and they also some other corridors like Highway 101. Recargo sort of failed, right, in their ability to execute on those grants, and so that funding didn't go anywhere. But then you also have, unfortunately, a lot of the hardware that did go in under the grant went in, I would say, underperforming. I realize that there's a lead time, right, and at the point in time when those CEC grant funds went in, 50 kilowatt chargers were, you know, what was available, but 5 years later, putting those 50 kilowatt chargers in seemed like a huge waste of public funds. But at least they went in, right? So the funding did actually happen, and, you know, charging sites were actually brought online. I feel like there are a few areas where they're still sort of failing, and the one that I keep pointing to is Highway 395 north of Reno, and then up into eastern Oregon. But this is just California, what California actually has control over, and they really haven't funded any public chargers there. You're talking about a scenic state highway, right? So you would think that that would be something that the CEC would be interested in funding. And that's not the only scenic highway. There are several others in California, but that's probably the grossest in terms of neglect and lack of coverage. Basically, you've created a gap now that's larger than the state of West Virginia with zero public charging infrastructure, and that's a problem, right? So that's the and I've talked to EVgo, I've talked to Electrify America, I've recommended site locations, and Rivian even doesn't have chargers there. Tesla only started putting chargers there last year, so yeah, it's an area where Hannon and the CEC, they should really be looking to put their public funds to use in creating infrastructure there, because that's where it's not going to happen naturally. And then, of course, there are other aspects where they're talking about Governor Newsom's, mandates of 2035 all electric, 2045 any bus operating or heavy truck operating on the road needs to be electric or zero emission.
Governor Newsom had an executive order from 2020 that says starting after 2035, we will not sell brand new combustion vehicles in California. The Air Resources Board just put that in place about a week ago. And what's really amazing, sometimes we forget about the medium-duty, heavy-duty space, so trucks and buses and delivery vehicles. That same executive order said by 2045, not only should new sales be zero emission, but all trucks and buses on the road should be zero emission by 2045. And 2035 for drayage trucks. Those are those very polluting diesel vehicles that go around port districts.
But meanwhile, California Governor's Office has been issuing record numbers of fracking permits. When California was wagging their finger at GM for wanting to follow federal regulations instead of CARB regulations, at that point in time, California's entire state fleet was only 6% hybrid and plug-in. So not even just plug-in or plug-in hybrid, that entire category was 6% of California's state fleet. That's pretty bad for a state that says that they're leading. So, yeah, I basically, suffice to say, a lot of these panels, I had issues with the people that were presenting them, though I did enjoy a number of them. There was another one with the charging infrastructure, how to choose a charger.
To be probably the most daunting aspect of EV ownership. Certainly is viewed as the most daunting aspect in the eyes of people who have not yet taken the plunge. It seems like something that could go wrong in a number of different ways. And as those of us who drive EVs know, it sometimes does, but not that often. And actually, if you know what you're doing, if you're strategic about it, charging can be very straightforward almost all the time. So we have some experts here, and we're going to basically talk about how and when to use the different kinds of chargers available to you. And hopefully we're going to follow that up with some spirited discussion about what the future might hold. What does charging look like when everyone drives electric cars? What on earth is bi-directional charging, and why is it a really, really big deal? These are some of the things that we're going to chop through today.
That was unfortunate because they only provided a 30-minute slot for 5 panelists who I think, they had Webasto, they had EVgo. I think this is a panel that could have easily, each person on it had 30 minutes to themselves, and especially on the topic of choosing the right chargers and issues around chargers. Is it range anxiety or is it actually charger anxiety? How do you get access? Who pays for it? There's a lot of really important topics that came up with that, and I don't think that they were able to be discussed in any real depth, right? And then there was another interesting panel with Ben Sullins, and then Nikki Gordon Bloomfield was on it from Transport Evolved. And I think the premise started out flawed. It was basically, did the Cybertruck get struck by lightning, right? So this idea is that Tesla was somehow vanquished by Ford because Ford released the F-150 Lightning before Tesla was able to release their Cybertruck, even though I believe the Cybertruck was unveiled long before the Lightning. And then, of course, thrown into that mix were discussions of the Rivian R1T.
Ben, you own a Rivian. I know you spent a lot of time with the F-150, and you've been in a Cybertruck.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of dealer model. There's a lot of other stuff, but just as pure trucks, what's your take on the three?
Well, the F-150 is the best truck in terms of what it can do, right? And it's Ford, and the accessories, like you said. It's, if you're using it for work or something, like serious, F-150, 100%. The Rivian is the fun truck, right? I can race a 911 and win. That's insane. It's unreal. I can beat a Model 3 Performance in a drag race in a 7,000 pound. It's just, what? That should not be possible. So it is the absolute most fun vehicle I've ever owned. The Cybertruck, I was one of the few that got to ride in it at the event, and the only thing that stuck out to me was how gigantic it was. And it's really hard to overstate it. I mean, I remember sitting in the back seat, and it has a triangle for the roof, right? And I could barely touch the top, right? And it was that big. And I don't know, 5'11" and 3/4, I'm not the smallest guy, but it was just crazy, the design and the shape and all that. And my concern or thought with the Cybertruck was, obviously that was like a prototype, but it was so early, I'm looking at it going, this doesn't have any of the truck stuff, right? There's no, and Rivian kind of missed the boat on this too, like there's no bumper, there's no, all these tie downs, there's so many things where I'm like, yeah, it's not quite there, but I would expect them to come out with that. So I think for me, it's more of a design choice at that point. It's gonna be fast and have long range and be all the great things that Teslas are known for, but whether or not you like that design or the Rivian, I think would probably be the chief thing that I would go with, and I would say like the Rivian. But a work truck, hands down, F-150.
But funny enough, very little of that was any sort of discussion of the GMC Hummer EV, or realistically the fact that the Chevrolet Silverado EV would be coming to market before the Cybertruck. If we see the Cybertruck is still a big question mark. So, I feel like there's a huge blind spot in terms of the Tesla bias that I saw on that panel. And, luckily, Nikki was up there in terms of, being able to sort of speak truth to power?
I think it's obvious which one I chose because it's sitting over there. If I had a choice and I could add a choice, it would actually be an electric Maverick. Here's why.
Yeah.
The Cybertruck, I don't think it's going to pass safety. I don't think there's any way that it is going to pass pedestrian safety standards. I know my truck, if it had to pass automobile safety standards, would not pass, and we have to be thinking more about pedestrians and other road users rather than driving great big things like that. I own that because I run a business and we had to fill it full of camera gear and equipment. We had that truck full. I've towed a tiny house with it, I've towed other things with it, and for me it works fine, but really I would like a smaller, more compact, safer for everybody else truck. That's what I want.
We need more compact electric trucks. We don't necessarily need this, to perpetuate this model of huge, massive trucks, something that the Cybertruck does, right? It just leans into really something that we should be moving away from anyway. Supporting things like the Maverick, platform as a truck, and as you following my channel, the Ranger Electric is something that I think Ford needs to revisit. I'm going to be revisiting the 20-year-old Ranger Electrics when I get home. But yeah, the idea that not everyone needs a full-size truck, and I agree, but I also know a number of people who need to have full-size trucks, and having both covered is ideal. And then, of course, there's also the issue of dealership versus online sales. And I think they conflated some issues, too, because they were talking a lot about the big problem Ford has is their dealership network, and really it's the dealer markups and their adjustments that they're making to the price that they're charging customers, which I think, frankly, is being a little bit overblown. Is Tesla's online pricing model superior? Possibly. It doesn't necessarily mean like getting rid of dealerships completely, though. It just means that the dealerships have limited authority or ability to mark up their prices, really. And, of course, the other aspect of that, though, is while on the surface, Tesla's model is more open and more free, the reality is, and again, thank Nikki for bringing this to light, the reality is, in terms of servicing, you are more controlled by that online sales model through the central company, through the central office, through the mothership, including all repairs and all servicing. You're way more controlled and constrained and limited by that than you are by automaker working with a dealership model where just by design repair and support and parts and specifications and training materials all have to be publicly available. So there were issues with both, and then I forget the name of the other panelist who brought this up, but he basically said that, and I agree with this completely, the reason online sales models work for Tesla right now or for Rivian is because EV supply is currently constrained, but EV demand seems to be just beyond any of these automakers' capacity to fill. And what that means is, right now, Tesla's online sales model works, direct sales model works, because they don't have to maintain inventory. Whereas dealerships were really created as a buffer between the automaker and the consumer, and that buffer allows, for the absorption of inventory. And so when Tesla does get to the point where they are able to produce more vehicles than there is demand for the vehicles that they produce, their online sales model might not work, or it might need to be enhanced through the use of a dealership. So it's kind of an interesting topic, but it's also sort of purely academic at this point, because for the foreseeable future, every automaker is going to be operating under a constrained battery supply, and you're just not going to get enough batteries to meet the demand for the electric vehicles that you're producing. And this is across the board, even for car companies who are not building the most compelling EVs, or aren't building the cheapest EVs or the most accessible EVs. The demand right now for these EVs is higher than the battery supply. And it's something that's going to need to be addressed. But I didn't get a chance to look at all of the booths there. Like I said, I think this was a really fun, interesting first day. I'm surprised at how many people recognized me from my channel. So, Q and Bernie and Paul, number of people recognized me from my channel, people I've had, exchanges with in the past. I haven't had a chance to go up and say hi to Nikki yet. I'll try to make a point to do that tomorrow. I ran into Kyle Connor. We talked about possibly doing a collaboration. He and I don't necessarily see eye to eye on a lot of issues, but at the same time, I respect that he has a more nuanced view of things. And so when you listen to what he's saying about charging infrastructure or throughput or things of that nature, I feel like he is operating with a little bit more of a nuance. And he projects his take, but almost so strongly that I think, I don't want to say it invalidates other takes, but it just doesn't necessarily acknowledge them in terms of like trip preparation, trip expectations, charging, things like that. And it's a based position, right? So as adults, we all have to understand that not everybody agrees all the time, and that doesn't necessarily mean that both parties are wrong or one is right and one is wrong. There can be differences in preferences and differences in opinion, time management, trip planning, things like that. So, like my big criticism of Kyle has always been the focus on what I would consider cannonball runs, where in my experience, that's not how a majority of people travel, but at the same time, a large enough percentage of people do travel that way that Kyle's perspective is very valid. In the meantime, I just closed out the show. Like I said, it was long and I didn't get to do as much as I would have liked, but I had a lot of good, fruitful conversations, discussions, things of that nature. Anyway, I decided to stop by, check out this EVgo charger that was put in behind this Sheraton. It looks like they expanded one of their old 50 kilowatt charging sites. So this one now has 6 chargers with 250 kilowatt, 200 kilowatt, and then 2 350 kilowatt, which actually isn't that bad for a hotel parking lot. I mixed messages in terms of the parking authorization and whether you actually have to be a guest to be parking here, but these spots are open, the stalls are open. I'm not staying at the Sheraton, but I figured I would come by. I just validated that plug-in charge does work on these 100 kilowatt Delta stations, so plugged in and started automatically, though the activation is a bit slow. So I'm not sure why the Delta charger takes that long to initiate a charge. I feel like the 50 kilowatt units do it a lot faster on the plug-in charge, and then I think maybe the 350 kilowatt would be slower, but I'll test that out too. There's another 350 kilowatt EVgo site that I'll probably test before I leave San Diego. So maybe I'll test one of the Signets. I did talk to EVgo too, and they did say that moving forward, their 350 kilowatt units would be the Delta 350 kilowatt units, which is great because I actually haven't had a chance to use one of those yet. None of them are on these sort of West Coast charging sites. But anyway, so I'm just going to call it a wrap for the day. Like I said, I just wanted to charge up a little bit while I closed out the day, collected my thoughts. I hope this was an interesting little video. I tried to splice in a decent amount of B-roll, and yeah, let me know what you think. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and thank you for watching.